This, of course, came as a huge shock, and William and I have been doing everything we can to process and manage this privately for the sake of our young family. As you can imagine, this has taken time. It has taken me time to recover from it.
Beneath the gold ceilings of Windsor Castle sits a collection worth more than most nations' treasuries, and almost no one watching this video actually understands who is legally allowed to touch it, who Camilla wears it. The cameras capture it. The headlines call it hers, but it isn't not one piece of it. That single fact, buried under decades of assumption, is about to change the way you see every royal photograph you've ever scrolled past. This is the real story behind the rules Camilla must follow. Not rumor. Not palace gossip. The actual legal architecture behind the jewels on her body every time she steps into public view. Because here is the truth most people never stop to ask about. When a queen consort dies, her jewelry does not simply vanish into private hands. It moves. It's inventoried. It's assigned. And the person wearing it in the meantime is, in the strictest legal sense, only ever borrowing it. Camilla included. Before we go further, if stories like this, the ones that pull back the curtain on what the public never sees, are the kind of thing you want more of, this is the moment to hit subscribe. Because what's coming in the next few minutes will change how you look at every tiara Camilla has ever worn. Here's a question for you, and I want a real answer in the comments.
By focusing on the things that will help me heal, in my mind, body and spirits. Having William by my side is a great source of comfort and reassurance too, as is the love, support and kindness that has been shown by so many of you.
If you found out tomorrow that something in your family, something everyone assumed was yours to keep, actually belonged to someone else the whole time, would you give it back without a fight? Type yes or no. I want to see this comment section flooded. Now let's go back to where this really begins. The crown jewels are not a single object. They are a category, a legal classification, and understanding that classification is the key to everything that follows. Some pieces belong to the crown itself, inseparable from the monarchy as an institution. They cannot be sold. They cannot be given away. They cannot be broken apart and passed down like a family ring. They exist to be worn by whoever occupies the role, and then handed to the next person who occupies it, forever, generation after generation. Other pieces sit in a different category entirely. The royal collection. Still not private property in the way most people imagine, but held in trust for the nation, displayed, documented, tracked by professional curators the same way a museum tracks its most valuable holdings. And then there is a third category, the smallest of the three, the only one that behaves the way ordinary inheritance behaves. Personal gifts. Items given directly to an individual, outside the formal structure, which can, in theory, be kept, willed, or passed to family the way any of us might leave a piece of jewelry to our own children. Camilla, as queen, has access to the first two categories every single day. She does not own them. She wears them the way a president occupies an office. Powerful. Temporary.
It means so much to us both. We hope that you'll understand that as a family, we now need some time, space and privacy.
Never truly hers. This is not speculation. This is documented royal protocol, confirmed by historians and royal correspondents who have spent decades studying exactly how the transfer of these items has worked across generations. And it raises a question that has quietly followed Camilla since the day she became queen consort. What happens when the person wearing the crown's jewels is not universally beloved by the public she wears them for? Because there is precedent here. Real precedent. Every consort in modern royal history has had to navigate this exact tension, walking a line between honoring the jewel's history and being accused of overstepping it. Some navigated it quietly, their choices barely making headlines. Others were watched far more closely, every appearance dissected, every piece questioned. Camilla, given the complicated path that brought her to the position she now holds, was never going to be one of the quiet ones. The scrutiny began almost immediately. And one name, more than any other, has haunted every single choice Camilla has made about what to wear. Diana. Because somewhere in that vast, glittering collection sit pieces the public still associates, rightly or wrongly, with a woman whose story never really ended, even decades after her death. And when Camilla reaches for certain rings, certain tiaras, certain pieces with that particular history attached, the public does not see fashion. They see a message. Whether Camilla intends one or not. What she is legally permitted to wear, and what the public is emotionally willing to accept her wearing, are turning out to be two very different questions entirely. And the gap between those two questions is where this story truly begins.
Everyone has a right to say, we live in thankfully, a free country.
And you don't sort of hold your breath and think, oh, please don't get in the way of my...
Every family has an object that means more than its price tag, and for the royal family, that object is a room full of them. This chapter picks up exactly where the last one left off. Inside the rules. The real ones. Because the truth is, most of what Camilla wears was never designed for her. It was designed for a queen who lived a century before she was born. Reworked. Reset. Reassigned. Piece by piece, generation by generation, moving forward through history like a relay race no one is allowed to drop. There is no better proof of that than what happened in the months before the coronation itself. For most of 2022, royal watchers assumed the answer was already written. Tradition said the consort's crown would come with the Kohinoor diamond set into it. That is what had happened at every coronation for nearly a century. That diamond had sat at the center of the Queen Mother's crown in 1937, and again on top of her coffin when the nation said goodbye to her in 2002. But the Kohinoor is not an ordinary diamond. It is 105 carats of contested history, and multiple nations, India among them, have spent generations demanding it back. Historians who have studied its journey describe it plainly. It did not arrive in British hands through a gift freely given. It arrived after conquest, handed over by a 10-year-old boy king, under circumstances one journalist who wrote its full history described as anything but voluntary. So Buckingham Palace made a decision, and the decision itself became a story. Camilla would not wear the Kohinoor. Instead, she would wear something almost no one expected.
I think, to be honest, I'm not tempting fate, and I'm not touching it. I say there's a ring of steel around, and I'm not giving any secrets away here, because obviously the police don't ring me up saying, how do we run this?
Queen Mary's crown, made in 1911, pulled out of display at the Tower of London and quietly reworked for a new purpose. This was the first time in nearly 300 years that a queen had been crowned using an existing crown rather than a brand new one commissioned just for her. Officially, the palace called it a matter of sustainability and efficiency. But royal historians read it differently, and they said so publicly. One historian, a doctoral researcher who has spent years studying the monarchy's use of symbolism, called it an intentional statement, a way for the new king to avoid turning his own coronation into an accidental diplomatic incident. Because here is what almost no one outside royal circles understood at the time. Refusing the Kohinoor did not mean refusing controversy altogether. The crown Camilla ultimately wore was reset with 3 diamonds instead, the Cullinan III, 4th, and 5th, pulled from Queen Elizabeth's own personal jewelry collection as a tribute to her. Those stones carry their own complicated past. They came from South Africa. They were gifted to the British monarchy in 1907, following a war that had reshaped the region only years earlier. One expert who studies the intersection of royal jewelry and colonial history put it bluntly. If the Kohinoor represents one form of imperial history, the Cullinan diamonds represent another, just wearing a different name. So even the decision meant to avoid controversy became its own quiet controversy, one most casual viewers of the coronation never even noticed. That is the level of calculation behind every single piece in this collection. Nothing Camilla wears is random. Nothing is casual. Every earring, every brooch, every tiara passes through layers of advisors, historians, and image consultants before it ever touches her skin, because the palace has learned, across generations, that the public does not just see jewelry. They read it like a headline. One wrong choice does not just make gossip columns. It makes history, for the wrong reasons. If this is the kind of story that pulls you in, the kind where every glittering detail hides a decision made behind closed doors, make sure you are subscribed right now, because what happened next did not stay behind those doors for long. There is one piece of jewelry more talked about right now, in this exact moment, than almost anything else in Camilla's entire collection, and its story does not begin with Camilla at all. It begins nearly 100 years earlier with a woman named Dame Margaret Greville. Greville was a wealthy society hostess in the early 20th century, close to the royal family, close enough that when she died in 1942, she left her extraordinary jewelry collection to the woman who would later become the Queen Mother. Among those pieces was a tiara unlike anything else in the collection, commissioned from the French jeweler Boucheron in 1919.
And uncertainty. But in the midst of this crisis, we've also seen huge acts of kindness, generosity, and empathy.
A halo-shaped diadem in the Russian kokoshnik style, built around a single, staggering emerald weighing nearly 94 carats, ringed by 12 more emeralds and hundreds of diamonds. It is called the Greville Emerald Kokoshnik Tiara, and for most of its existence, almost nobody outside the palace even knew it existed. The Queen Mother never wore it publicly, not once, not that any photograph or record has ever confirmed. When she died in 2002, it passed to her daughter, Queen Elizabeth II, who also never wore it. For nearly 80 years, one of the most valuable tiaras in the entire royal collection simply sat in the vault, unseen, unworn, almost forgotten. Then, in October of 2018, it re-emerged, and the public finally understood why it mattered so much. Princess Eugenie chose it for her wedding day. But that decision came with a story of its own, one that only became public knowledge later. According to reporting at the time, Meghan Markle had reportedly wanted to wear that exact tiara for her own wedding to Prince Harry, only months earlier. She was told no. The tiara she ultimately wore was a different piece entirely, the Queen Mary diamond bandeau. And when Eugenie stepped out of a vintage Rolls-Royce that October, wearing the very emerald tiara Meghan had wanted, it did not go unnoticed. Pause on that for a moment. Because that alone would have been enough to make this piece one of the most talked about tiaras in modern royal history. But it did not stop there. For 7 years after Eugenie's wedding, the tiara vanished again. Back into the vault. Unworn. Untouched. Nobody saw it in public. Not at a single state banquet, not at a single gala, not once. Until November of 2025. That is when Queen Camilla wore it, publicly, for the very first time, at a diplomatic corps reception hosted at Windsor Castle. The timing was not lost on a single royal correspondent watching that night. Because that same month, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, Eugenie's own father, had been stripped of his royal titles entirely, one of the most significant falls from institutional grace the modern monarchy has ever handled in public view. And there was Camilla, wearing his daughter's wedding tiara, for the first time anyone had ever seen her wear it, at the exact moment his family's name had become a source of national scandal. Royal watchers did not stay quiet about it. Some read it as an act of quiet solidarity, a gesture toward Eugenie and her sister Beatrice during one of the hardest chapters their branch of the family has ever faced. Others read it as something colder, an appropriation of a moment that was never meant to belong to anyone but Eugenie herself, worn by someone with no personal connection to it at all. One commentator wrote it plainly online, the kind of comment that spread fast because it captured exactly what so many people were already feeling. That wearing it diluted the meaning it once held for the person who wore it first, on the single most important day of her life. Others pushed back just as hard. It is a crown jewel, they argued. Camilla has every right to wear it. It was never Eugenie's to keep in the first place. And there it is again. That exact same tension. Legal permission on one side. Emotional ownership on the other. Two truths that refuse to sit comfortably in the same room. Comment below right now. If a piece of jewelry carried that much personal history for someone else, someone in your own family, even if you were technically allowed to wear it, would you? Yes or no? I want to see where this comment section lands. Because here is what makes this different from ordinary fashion criticism, different from any headline about a dress or a handbag. These are not just diamonds. They are memory, given a physical shape, moved from one woman's most significant day to another woman's diplomatic reception, decades later, with nobody asking the first woman how she felt about it. Memory does not stay quiet, even when it is legally allowed to move. This chapter moves the story forward because ownership was never really about who wears something today. It was always about what happens next. Royal historians widely agree on one pattern, one that repeats itself across a century of British royal history with almost eerie consistency. These jewels do not stay in one place for long. They move forward, generation to generation, almost always toward the next working royal woman position to represent the family publicly. That puts Catherine, Princess of Wales, directly in the historical path of this collection's future. She already wears pieces with clear lines of succession behind them, diamonds and sapphires that once belonged to Diana, now reappearing at state events on the wife of the man who will one day be king. Royal correspondents have tracked this migration for years, watching certain brooches, certain rings, certain earrings shift quietly from one working royal woman to the next, photographed at official events long before anyone points out the pattern out loud. It rarely happens with an announcement. There is no press release that says, starting today, this piece belongs to someone new. It simply appears on a different person, at a different event, and the shift becomes real the moment the cameras catch it. And one day, further down that same path, stands Princess Charlotte. This is not confirmed decree. No official announcement exists naming exactly which piece goes to which royal, decades in advance. The palace does not operate that way, not publicly. But the pattern across a century of royal history is consistent enough that experts treat it less like guesswork and more like near certainty. Grandmother to mother. Mother to daughter. The collection does not belong to any one woman. It belongs to the roll itself, passed hand to hand like something too important to ever truly stop moving. Which means everything Camilla wears today, every tiara, every brooch, every historically loaded piece she puts on for a state dinner, is temporary in a way most of us never stop to consider. She is not the final destination for any of it. She is a bridge. And bridges, no matter how beautifully they are built, are meant to be crossed. Think about that the next time you see a photograph of her at a state banquet, dripping in diamonds that belong to women who died before she was even born, diamonds that will one day belong to a little girl who has not yet grown into the role waiting for her. None of it stays. That is the part almost nobody talks about when these stories go viral. Everyone argues about who should be wearing what right now. Almost no one stops to ask where it is all quietly heading next. This is the final chapter, and if you have made it this far, you already understand something most casual viewers scrolling past headlines never will. That the story of these jewels was never really about jewelry. Every time controversy touches this collection, the palace responds the same careful way, almost like a formula refined across generations. A brief statement. Measured, careful language. No admission, no confirmation, just enough to lower the temperature without ever fully explaining what happened behind the scenes. That pattern is not accidental. It is decades of institutional practice, refined by a family that has learned, the hard way, across scandals far larger than a tiara, that silence often protects them better than explanation ever could. Royal historians sometimes describe this approach using an old phrase that has followed the monarchy for generations. Never complain. Never explain. Let the story move past you rather than feeding it more to talk about. But silence has a cost too. Because when the palace stays quiet, the public fills in the blanks themselves. And once a narrative forms in the public imagination, whether it is generous or unforgiving, correcting it becomes almost impossible, no matter how many carefully worded statements follow months later. Look at what happened with the Greville tiara alone. One appearance. No official comment on the timing. And within days, the internet had already decided what it meant, split cleanly down the middle, arguing a story the palace never actually told them. Which brings this story back to where it started. To a woman who has spent her entire public life being measured against decisions that were made for her, wearing history she did not personally choose, under a level of scrutiny few people watching this video could survive for even a single week. Camilla did not write these rules. She simply inherited a collection built by centuries of women before her, each one temporary, each one watched, each one eventually replaced by someone younger, someone new, someone the public has not yet learned to doubt. That is the real story behind the jewels Camilla wears. Not a story of theft. A story of inheritance, obligation, and the impossible weight of wearing other women's history in public, one appearance at a time, knowing that every single choice will be read as a message W. The sapphire ring is not the only piece that proves this pattern, and it may not even be the most telling one. Consider the Lover's Knot tiara, a diamond and pearl piece commissioned by Gerald in 1913 for Queen Mary herself, modelled after an even older tiara tied to the very first Duchess of Cambridge back in 1818. When Queen Elizabeth II inherited it, she wore it herself through much of the 1950s. Then, in 1981, when Diana married Charles, the tiara passed to her, on permanent loan, one of the very first pieces the young Princess of Wales was ever given. Diana wore it constantly. It became one of her defining pieces, seen at the state opening of Parliament, seen in Hong Kong in 1989 paired with the white beaded gown people still call her Elvis look decades later. It is also, according to reports at the time, a tiara that genuinely hurt her. The design is heavy, ornate, and by some accounts gave her headaches every time she wore it for an entire evening. She wore it anyway. When Charles and Diana divorced, the tiara did not stay with her. It went back to the royal family, into a Buckingham Palace safe, and it did not reappear in public again for the rest of Diana's life. After her death in 1997, it simply disappeared from view entirely. For 18 years. Then, in 2015, Kate Middleton pulled it out of the vault and wore it to the annual diplomatic reception. She has worn it more than a dozen times since, most recently at a state banquet, and each time she does, the comparison to Diana follows her instantly, in every headline, every photo caption, every comment section. That is not an accident of fashion. It is the same pattern playing out in front of us, in real time, decades after the ring, decades after the tiara first left Diana's hands. A piece tied unmistakably to one woman's public identity, sealed away in silence for nearly 2 decades, then quietly reissued to the next woman standing in that same position. Nobody announced it. There was no ceremony. Kate simply wore it, and the internet did the rest, the same way it always does with this collection. Whether one was intended or not. There is one more piece worth understanding, because it shows this isn't only about jewels tied to Diana. It is about an entire collection with layered, sometimes uncomfortable histories, all moving through the same quiet succession. In 1947, ahead of her wedding to Prince Philip, the young Princess Elizabeth received an extraordinary gift from Asofjar VII, the Nizam of Hyderabad, then considered one of the richest men alive. He instructed Cartier to let her choose whatever she wanted from their collection. She chose 2 pieces. A floral diamond tiara with detachable rose brooches, and a matching necklace, now known as the Nizam of Hyderabad necklace, later valued by jewelry experts at somewhere around £66 million, making it, by some estimates, the single most valuable jewel in the entire royal collection. Elizabeth wore it for decades, including in her official 1952 portrait as the new queen. In 2014, she lent it to Kate, then the Duchess of Cambridge, for a gala at the National Portrait Gallery. She lent it again in 2019. Royal watchers noted immediately that Kate was the only royal woman, besides Elizabeth herself, ever photographed wearing it, a detail widely read as a clear signal about where that piece was eventually heading. Elizabeth also modified the matching tiara decades earlier, in the 1970s, dismantling it entirely to create a different piece known today as the Burmese ruby tiara, keeping only the 3 detachable rose brooches from the original in circulation. That single decision says something important about this entire collection that easily gets lost in the drama of who wore what and when. These pieces are not frozen in time. They get reset, reworked, sometimes broken down completely and rebuilt into something new, by whichever queen currently holds them, according to her own taste, her own judgment, her own sense of what the moment calls for. Camilla will eventually make those same decisions herself, about pieces currently sitting untouched in a vault most of the public will never see. What she keeps intact, what she resets, What she quietly retires the way the Queen Mother once retired the Greville Emerald Kokoshnik tiara for 80 years. All of it becomes part of the same long, unbroken chain. Nobody wearing these jewels today is the last word on any of them. They are only ever the current custodian, adding one more chapter to a story that started long before them and will keep moving long after they are gone. For all the attention pieces like the Greville Emerald Kokoshnik tiara generate whenever they surface once in a decade, they are not actually what Camilla reaches for most. That distinction belongs to a completely different tiara, one with a nearly identical name that trips up even seasoned royal watchers. The Bacheron honeycomb tiara, sometimes simply called the Greville tiara, a diamond piece built from a honeycomb and lozenge pattern, originally created for Margaret Greville in 1921 using diamonds recycled from an even older tiara the same jeweler had made her 2 decades earlier. It came into royal hands the same way the emerald piece did, part of the same 1942 bequest to the Queen Mother. But unlike its emerald counterpart, the Queen Mother wore this one constantly. She had it altered by Cartier in 1953, raised at the center, reworked to suit her taste, and it became one of her defining pieces for the rest of her life. When Camilla began attending white tie events as a working royal, this was the tiara she gravitated toward almost immediately, and according to royal jewelry historians, the reason is refreshingly unglamorous. It is simply lighter than the alternatives available to her. Comfortable enough to wear for an entire evening without the ache that plagued Diana every time she put on a lover's knot. Camilla has worn it to nearly every major white tie occasion of her royal life since. It is not controversial. It is not loaded with a story about someone else's wedding day. It is, in a strange way, the one piece in this entire saga that simply belongs to the rhythm of her own daily royal life, chosen for comfort rather than symbolism. Contrast that with the one time Camilla wore something on the opposite end of that spectrum entirely. In October of 2005, at a state banquet honoring the King and Queen of Norway, Camilla stepped out wearing the Delhi Durbar tiara, a piece that had not been worn by any member of the royal family in nearly 6 decades. It was built in 1911, commissioned for Queen Mary's appearance at a ceremonial gathering in India marking George V's new status as Emperor of India, a title and an era the modern monarchy does not exactly advertise. The tiara is enormous, built on a scale most working royals today avoid entirely, precisely because pieces that large tend to draw exactly the kind of attention the family has spent decades trying not to invite. Camilla wore it once. She has never worn it again. 2 years later, at a Commonwealth summit in Uganda, she reached for yet another rarely seen piece, the Bacheron tiara, paired that night with the Greville diamond necklace and formal decorations, an appearance so deliberately grand that royal commentators at the time described her as looking, in their words, every inch a queen in waiting, years before that title would actually belong to her. Then, just as quickly, she stopped. For years afterward, Camilla scaled back toward smaller, quieter, more understated pieces, largely from her own family's collection rather than the grand lone tiaras that had marked those early appearances. Royal watchers at the time linked the shift directly to public sentiment. Those early tiara moments, dazzling as they were, had not been universally well received. The public was still adjusting to her presence at all, and jewelry that grand, that historically loaded, read to many as reaching for a stature she had not yet been given. So she waited. 2 decades passed before she reached for that level of visibility again, culminating in a coronation crown, and now, most recently, an emerald tiara that had waited even longer than she had. Nothing about that timeline is accidental. It is a woman who learned, slowly, publicly, sometimes painfully, exactly how much the collection she now oversees can say on her behalf, and exactly how carefully that volume has to be controlled. Everything covered so far moves through one system. Crown property, passed forward according to unwritten rules nobody voted on, decided quietly by whoever currently sits at the top of the family. But there is one part of this story that never belonged to that system at all, and it comes from Diana herself. Because unlike the crown jewels, unlike the royal collection pieces Camilla borrows and eventually returns, Diana's personal jewelry was actually hers. Bought for her. Gifted to her outside official duty. And in her will, she left specific, deliberate instructions for exactly what should happen to it. "I would like you to allocate all my jewelry to the share to be held by my sons," she wrote, "so that their wives may, in due course, have it or use it." She left the exact division to her family's discretion, but the intention was unmistakable. This collection was never meant to disappear into a vault. It was meant to keep moving, generation to generation, worn by the women her sons would one day marry. And that is exactly what happened. William kept his mother's gold Cartier tank watch, a gift from her own father, one she wore constantly after her divorce, reportedly his favorite single piece from her entire collection. Harry, by most accounts, was originally drawn to the 12-carat sapphire engagement ring his father had given her, the one Diana herself picked out of a jeweller's catalogue as a 19-year-old. But when the time came, William swapped with his brother so that Kate could wear it. That is the ring on Kate's hand today, the same stone, the same setting, worn now by an entirely different woman, at an entirely different moment in this family's history. Harry, in turn, gave Meghan a different piece entirely from his mother's collection, an emerald-cut aquamarine cocktail ring Diana had switched to wearing later in life, after she stopped feeling comfortable with the engagement ring that had defined her early marriage. The two brothers, dividing their mother's jewelry between them, each choosing a piece to give to the woman he loved, in a decision their mother had specifically asked them to make together. Kate went on to wear Diana's sapphire earrings, first appearing in them within months of her own engagement. She has since worn Diana's 3-strand pearl bracelet, worn during a state visit to Germany, worn again years later at a Holocaust memorial service. She has stepped out in the South Sea pearl earrings that were once one of Diana's signature evening pieces, and more recently, in a previously unseen sapphire necklace believed to trace back to a wedding gift Diana received from the Saudi royal family in 1981, debuted while hosting the President of Ukraine at Buckingham Palace. Meghan, before she and Harry stepped back from royal duties, wore Diana's gold butterfly earrings on tour in Australia, and her Cartier tank watch at a global concert where she spoke publicly about the pandemic's impact on women. None of that required palace approval the way a crown jewel does. It required only what Diana herself had already decided, years before either of her sons had even met the women they would marry, a mother quietly making sure that whoever they chose would inherit something of her, regardless of what the institution around them decided to do with everything else. That is the part of this story that sits completely outside the vault, the crowns, and the careful calculations of what Camilla can and cannot wear. It is the only piece of this entire saga that was never really about the crown at all. It was about a mother writing one last wish into a will, and trusting her sons to carry it out exactly the way she asked. There is one more piece from the coronation itself worth understanding, smaller than any crown, easy to miss entirely if you were watching from home, and yet arguably more symbolically loaded than anything else Camilla wore that day. It is called the Sovereign's Ring, sometimes referred to as the Wedding Ring of England, and it was made in 1831 for the joint coronation of William IV and his wife, Queen Adelaide. Charles wore the King's version that day, an octagonal blue sapphire overlaid with rubies arranged into a cross, echoing the colours of the Union flag itself, placed on his finger by the Archbishop as what royal tradition calls a symbol of kingly dignity. Camilla, meanwhile, wore the companion piece, Queen Adelaide's own ring, a ruby surrounded by diamonds, the exact same ring worn by Queen Alexandra, by Queen Mary, and by the Queen Mother at their own coronations. Both rings have been used at nearly every coronation since 1831, with one memorable exception. When Queen Victoria was crowned in 1838, jewellers simply could not resize William's ring to fit her hand in time. So they made her an entirely new one, based on the same design, but they misread the instructions and built it for her smallest finger instead of her ring finger. On the day of her coronation, the Archbishop forced it onto the correct finger anyway, in front of the entire assembled court, and Victoria reportedly had to soak her hand in iced water afterward just to get it back off. It is a small, almost absurd detail buried inside one of the most solemn ceremonies in British history. And it says something true about this entire collection that goes far beyond any single tiara or vault. These objects are not abstractions. They are physical things, worn by real women, on real days, sometimes causing real pain, real embarrassment, real discomfort, long before anyone in a comment section ever gets to weigh in on what they meant. Victoria's ring hurt. Diana's tiara gave her headaches. Camilla's own upside-down brooch became a footnote repeated for years. The weight of this collection was never only symbolic. Sometimes it was simply, literally, weight. There is one piece worth returning to now, because it shows how deliberately this kind of symbolism gets deployed even in the most recent chapters of Camilla's public life, far from any tabloid controversy at all. The Cullinan V, an 18.8 carat, heart-shaped diamond, cut from the largest gem-quality rough diamond ever discovered, unearthed in South Africa in 1905. It began its life as part of a stomacher Queen Mary wore at the 1911 Delhi Durbar, later reset into a brooch she wore across decades at the weddings of most of her children at 2 coronations. When Elizabeth inherited it in 1953, she wore it for the rest of her life on Prince Philip's 99th birthday portrait at Princess Eugenie's wedding. In May of 2024, at the very first royal garden party held after Elizabeth's death, Camilla chose to wear it. Not by accident. A heart-shaped diamond that had belonged to the woman whose absence still shaped nearly every room the family walked into, worn deliberately, publicly, as an act of remembrance rather than a personal statement. She did it again nearly 2 years later, on an even bigger stage. During a state visit to the United States in April of 2026, Camilla wore the Cullinan V brooch once more, this time paired with an appearance at the White House alongside the American president. And the following day, at the 9/11 Memorial in New York City, she chose something different entirely, a diamond, ruby, and sapphire brooch that had belonged to the Queen Mother, depicting Britannia, the female warrior figure who has represented the nation itself for centuries. 2 brooches. 2 days. 2 deliberate messages, chosen for 2 entirely different kinds of occasions. One honoring a grandmother's diamond legacy at the seat of American power, the other reaching for a symbol of national resilience at a memorial built around grief and endurance. Royal correspondents covering the visit did not need to ask what either choice meant. By this point in her time as queen, that language has become second nature to her, the same instinct the entire royal family has spent generations refining. Reach into a vault built by other women, choose exactly the right piece for exactly the right room, and let the diamond say what no official statement ever could. That is the version of Camilla the public rarely stops to notice. Not a woman fighting to justify her place in this collection anymore. A woman who has finally learned to speak its language fluently. Not every crisis inside this collection comes from public controversy. Some of the most dramatic moments never made a single headline at the time, because the panic happened behind closed doors, minutes before the cameras started rolling. Queen Mary's fringe tiara, a diamond piece originally given to Mary as a wedding gift in 1893, built from 47 individual diamond bars, versatile enough to be worn as either a tiara or a necklace. In November of 1947, on the morning of her own wedding to Prince Philip, the young Princess Elizabeth was being dressed at Buckingham Palace when a part of the tiara simply snapped off in the hairdresser's hands. There was no time for panic to show. The court jeweler was given a police escort straight back to the workshop, repaired the tiara at emergency speed, and returned it in time for Elizabeth to walk down the aisle with it in place, the entire crisis contained so completely that most of the wedding guests that day never knew anything had gone wrong at all. Her daughter, Princess Anne, wore the same tiara for her own wedding in 1973, without incident. Then, in July of 2020, Princess Beatrice borrowed it for her own wedding, a quiet, pandemic-era ceremony held with only a handful of guests. And according to accounts that emerged only later, the tiara nearly failed a second time, slipping forward mid-fitting, the same piece that had betrayed a future queen on her own wedding morning almost 75 years earlier, threatening to do it again. It held. Nobody watching that small, scaled-back wedding had any idea how close it came to repeating history. That is the part of this entire story the public almost never sees, the part that happens minutes before the doors open, when a piece of jewelry worth more than most people's homes becomes, for just a moment, as fragile and unpredictable as anything else. The diamonds survive centuries. The mechanisms holding them together do not always survive a single morning. There is a rule buried inside this world that almost nobody outside royal circles has ever heard stated plainly, and it explains something the public constantly misreads as inconsistency. A tiara, by long-standing court etiquette, cannot traditionally be worn before 5 o'clock in the evening. Diamond headwear was historically considered far too extravagant for daylight, reserved instead for candlelight, for formal evening attire, for exactly the kind of white tie state banquets this entire story keeps circling back to. The only exceptions are the biggest ceremonial moments the monarchy has: weddings, coronations, jubilees, when the significance of the day overrides the clock itself. Outside of those rare exceptions, the rule holds. Every single time. So when critics ask why Camilla did not simply wear a certain piece to a certain daytime event, the answer is often not scandal, not calculation, not a message being sent. It is a rule older than the monarchy's current occupants, one that governs every working royal woman equally, whether the public realizes it or not. But rules like that have not stopped Camilla from doing something else entirely, something royal watchers have only started openly discussing in the past 2 years. She has been reaching deeper into the vault than any queen consort before her, pulling out pieces so rarely seen that even dedicated historians struggle to place them. In December of 2023, she wore an enormous, ornately tasseled diamond stomacher that had belonged to the Queen Mother, a piece so obscure that no photograph of the Queen Mother ever actually wearing it has ever surfaced. In November of 2024, she wore the aquamarine ribbon tiara, 5 interlocking diamond ribbons each set with a large aquamarine, last seen in public in 1970, at a single royal banquet in the Canadian Arctic, worn only once more since, briefly, by Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, before vanishing again for over a decade. And in November of 2025, the same month she wore the Greville Emerald Kokoshnik tiara for the first time. One royal commentator, quoting an old spy film line about patterns, noted plainly that this had stopped looking like coincidence and started looking like something else entirely. A trend. Some read it as a woman who has simply grown comfortable enough, secure enough, 20 years into this role, to finally use the full breadth of what the vault actually contains. Others see something more deliberate, a queen quietly expanding what is considered normal for her to wear, testing exactly how far the boundaries the public built around her can be pushed before anyone objects out loud. That same pattern is not confined to Camilla alone. Catherine has followed a strikingly similar path in the same stretch of years, wearing the Strathmore tiara, a wedding gift originally given to the Queen Mother by her own father in 1923, unseen for 9 decades and barely confirmed to still exist in royal hands until historians rediscovered a single archival photograph of it. Then, at a state banquet for the German president, Catherine wore the Oriental circlet, a piece originally designed for Queen Victoria in 1853, worn since only by reigning queens themselves. Never, in all its history, by a princess. Until now. Not every piece in this collection arrives through inheritance at all. Some arrive as gifts, and gifts carry their own strange rules. When a member of the royal family receives jewelry during an official state visit, it does not become their personal property the way an ordinary gift would. It becomes crown property automatically, held on lifelong loan to the person it was given to, the same legal category as everything else in this story. Camilla learned that lesson early. During a visit to Saudi Arabia in the first years of her marriage, the Saudi royal family gifted her 3 separate jeweled necklaces, emerald, ruby, and sapphire, each one logged, tracked, and eventually worn publicly, once, on a specific trip in a specific country, timed deliberately to acknowledge the country that had given it. Diplomatic gifts of that scale are never worn casually. They are calculated appearances, matched to the giver, worn once and then largely retired, precisely because gifts like these sit in uncomfortable territory, generous on the surface, but never entirely free of the questions that come with accepting extraordinary wealth from a foreign government. Every single choice, once again, weighed, tracked, and quietly calculated, long before it ever reaches the cameras. If this pulled you in the way it pulled me in while researching it, do not scroll past this moment without hitting subscribe and leaving a comment. It genuinely helps this channel keep telling stories like this one, the kind that actually dig into what is real instead of repeating the same recycled headlines everyone else copies and pastes. Because next time, we are going somewhere even more specific. The full, documented history of the tiara Meghan Markle was reportedly told she could never wear, the real story behind that decision, and what it reveals about exactly how much control still sits at the very top of this family. You will not want to miss it.